All right, so this is page 63 of your packet. Now we're getting into the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is just another way to find x. So you're going to get to the point where you're going to have many different types of quadratic equations. Some of them can be factored. Some of them you can use the square root method, and some of them you can use the quadratic formula. Now, the good news is if you really are uncomfortable with factoring or the square root method, you can use the quadratic formula for every single quadratic. All right? Every single one you can use it for. Now, this is derived, right? It's derived. You're able to find it from the standard format of a quadratic. So you cannot use this unless you have it set up in standard format, which means that your x squared, x, and constant is in descending order. So if you have to rearrange your equation, rearrange it, make sure it is in descending order based on your exponents, so 2, 1, 0, and then you can use the quadratic formula. Now, if you notice, we're solving for x. There are no x's inside the quadratic formula. The only values are found by a, b, c. Okay? These numbers in front of your x values, those are what you're going to use inside the quadratic formula. Okay? So on page 63, number 27. Number 27 looks like this. X squared minus 4x minus 3 equals 0. So you can see it is in standard format. X squared, x, and then no x. So it's in descending order. So now we can identify our a, b, and c. When there is no number in front of your x squared, it's an assumed or an invisible 1. So that means our a value is 1. Our b value, make sure you use the sign, is negative 4. And our c value, again, use the sign, is negative 3. Now I have all the information I need to plug into my quadratic formula. So you can see we have a radical. If you need to remind yourself how to simplify radicals, go back to that video. And then we'll go from there. Okay, so now it's just plug in and chug out the answer. So b is negative 4. Here's what you want to be careful of. This negative right here is not that negative. Two different negatives. So what you're going to have is a negative, negative 4, plus or minus the square root, negative 4 squared, because that's what b is, minus 4 times 1, that's what a is, times negative 3, that's what c is, all divided by 2 times 1, 2 times a. Okay, so one more time, just so you can see it. b is negative 4. So I have a negative, negative 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 4 squared. Notice I put it in parentheses. If you put this in your calculator, okay, so just a reminder, if you put this in your calculator like that, negative 4 squared, you will get out negative 16. If you put this in your calculator with parentheses, negative 4 is in parentheses squared, you will get a positive 16. So be careful with that. This first b squared term should always be positive. You should never have a negative when you plug it in. Okay. So now, order of operation. It's just a calculation. Order of operation says I do underneath the radical first. So negative, negative 4 is a positive 4. That's an easy fix. Underneath the radical, I have 4 squared, negative 4 squared is 16. Then, when you come over here, just go ahead and multiply the numbers. 4 times 1 times 3 is 12. And then count your negatives. I have 2 negatives. That's an even number. That means this value is positive. So if you have an even number of negatives, your value over here is going to be positive. If you have an odd number of negatives, 1 or 3, this value is going to be a negative. Makes it much easier. And then all divided by 2 times 1 is 2. Keep going. 4 plus or minus 16 plus 12 is 28, all divided by 2. I think you can still see it. And then now you're going to simplify. So 28 is 4 and 7. So I have 4 plus or minus. Square root of 4 is 2. The 7 stays underneath the radical. Okay, so now this 2, I can simplify 4 divided by 2 and 2 divided by 2. So remember, if I were to rewrite this, it's going to look like this. Okay, so x is going to equal 2 plus or minus the square root of 7. Where I got the 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2. Where I got the square root of 7, 2 divided by 2, those cancel. All I have left is 1 times square root of 7, or just square root of 7. Okay, so with quadratic formula, you're literally identifying your a, b, and c. You're plugging those values into your quadratic equation. Do not plug in x's. What you're doing is you're solving for x. So just like when you factored and you solved for x, you got 2 answers. Exactly what you're going to do here. My 2 answers are 2 plus square root of 7 and 2 minus square root of 7. Now, with this one, since there's no i's, you could plug that in to your calculator and find out what exact point that is. But at this point, you don't need to do that. You can just write your answer in the simplified radical format. All right, let's try another one. All right, so let's try number 29. So 29 is x squared equals negative 5x plus 2. So remember, this is not in descending format. So you have to set everything to the left and solve for 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over my 5x as a plus 5x, and I'm going to bring my 2 over as a negative 2. So in descending order, it's going to be x squared plus 5x minus 2 equals 0. And now I can use the quadratic formula. Okay? So my a, I'm going to write it over here. My a is 1, my b is 5, and my c is negative 2. And now I'm just going to plug it into my quadratic formula. So negative b is 5 plus or minus 5 squared, excuse me, minus 4 times 1. C is negative 2, all divided by 2 times 1. And now it's order of operations. So negative 5 stays negative. And remember, we're solving for x. Plus or minus. Underneath my radical, 5 squared is 25. 4 times 1 times 2 is 8. I have 2 negatives, which makes it a positive 8, all divided by 2. So I have negative 5 plus or minus. 25 plus 8 should be 33. 33, all divided by 2. Now, this is your answer. 33 can only be broken up. The only 2 factors of 33 are 3 and 11. Neither one of those are perfect squares. So when you don't have a perfect square to simplify out, this is a very good answer. That's your answer. 2 answers still. You have the positive version and you have the negative version. Okay? And you can write it just in that format and you're good to go. All right, there you go. I think that's it. That's all for quadratics. They just give you a lot of practice. The key is making sure that you get it into the standard format. Make sure everything is on one side of the equal sign and 0 is on the other, and then double check that it is in descending order. As soon as you have that format, then you can just plug your a, b, and c into the quadratic formula and you're off and running.